We've retained our own legal counsel, Barrister Duncan Fairgrieve, teaches comparative law at the University of Paris, Dauphine. Thank you for being with us. Thanks as well to Wyn Grant, who joins us from Coventry, Professor of Political Science at Warwick University, and France 24 Europe editor Catherine Nicholson is with us here in the studio. Catherine, reaction there to what we just heard from Benedict and the growing chatter that it could go any which way if we are indeed heading towards a heavy defeat for that divorce deal.
Exactly. I was speaking earlier to a couple of contacts who are down at the European Parliament in Strasbourg. I'm off there tomorrow with my team. And there's not a lot of optimism down there in Strasbourg about what tonight's vote is going to hold for Theresa May. Exasperation on the EU side as well. A lot of people wondering why is the UK seemingly having its discussions with itself now about what kind of Brexit it wants to have. And there's also a lack of clarity about this extension idea. Benedict Pavillot just laid out some of the framework for that. But of course, this is an unprecedented situation. No member states ever tried to leave the EU. Therefore, no member state has ever asked for an extension. We've got this complication of European Parliament elections coming up in the calendar, 23rd to 26th of May. Donald Tusk, the President of the European Council, has already said publicly that he believes if there is an extension, it can't go beyond May 23rd, because if it did, the UK would still be a member state and therefore bound to holding European elections. So there's confusion there. I know that discussions on the legality of an extension beyond the EU Parliament elections are ongoing. I haven't myself seen any firm pronouncements on that. I don't know if any of our other guests have either.
All right, Duncan Fairgrieve, first of all, before we ask about what lies ahead, let's talk about last night for a second, because was this meeting in Strasbourg, this last-ditch meeting between Theresa May and Jean-Claude Juncker, was it something that significantly changed the divorce deal, or is this just a way for the EU to help out Theresa May in her bid to win over votes in Parliament?
That's open for debate at the moment. A lot of today has been poring over the quite complicated legal text which have been added to the withdrawal agreement that we had. And I think there are two schools of thought. I mean, there's one school that there's been a sort of repackaging exercise, essentially. And there's another school of thought, which is slightly different, which is actually there has been a real change, a real movement. They are legally binding measures. And clearly that's what the government have been putting forward as a way to try and push the deal over the line. But I mean, there is a debate going on there. Part of the problem, to be honest with you, is that it comes so late in the day that we get this series of measures with a vote less than 24 hours later. It's very, very difficult, of course.
Because there had been talk about pushing back by a couple of days the meaningful vote. That's not happening, though.
It hasn't happened. I think strategically, Theresa May wants to keep the pressure on. She doesn't want that debate to go on for too long. She wants to say, here's the package, we've got what you requested, Parliament asked me to go back, etc. And so therefore, it's this or it's the no deal scenario or no Brexit, as we just heard earlier. So I don't think she was ever very keen to push back the torturous moments for much longer. And strategically, it makes sense for her to do that, to give to now ask the question.
And time is running out, of course. It's a hard deadline of the 29th of March, written into UK law.
Yeah, and Wyn Grant, we heard Benedict Pavillot there mention she didn't get much help from her own Attorney General. He poured cold water over just how much of a change to the backstop agreement this was. What does that tell you?
Well, of course, he is an independent legal official and he has to give the best legal advice that he can. And that's what he did, in fact, because it didn't help her at all. So now we're in this very difficult situation. There's this talk of having a general election, but that wouldn't solve anything because you probably end up with a hung parliament again and both parties are deeply divided on the issue.
So you don't believe there's going to be a snap general election?
I think it's possible, but I think it's unlikely. And if it did happen, I don't think it would actually resolve anything at all.
More broadly, it brings us to the question of Theresa May's strategy that you just heard a minute ago Duncan Fairgrieve allude to. Push it as late as possible, therefore putting members of Parliament under pressure to approve her deal. What does that strategy look like now?
Well, I don't think it looks very good at all, because it's quite clear that most of the European Research Group are not going to support this deal, and that also applies to the Democratic Unionists from Northern Ireland, who are really the crucial people in all this. I mean, if they decided they were going to back this deal, probably the European Research Group would as well, but that's not going to happen. So she's really running out of time. As was pointed out a moment ago, this departure date on March the 29th is set out in statute, so any motion that's passed on no deal doesn't set that aside. The government would have to introduce new legislation to overcome that.
Are there different shades of defeat? If she loses by less than 100 votes, if she loses by 150, if she loses by more, what does it change for Theresa May?
Well, I think if she lost by less than 100 votes, that would be quite a good outcome for her, but I think that's quite unlikely. I think we are looking at defeat more in the region of 140 to 150 votes, and that does, once again, undermine her authority. And, of course, people are talking about replacing her as Prime Minister, but there's no real mechanism by which that can be done, because she's not going to resign. You can't have a vote of no confidence in her within the Conservative Party. That's already been tried, so it will be then up to senior cabinet ministers to try and persuaded to go, but I don't think that's a very likely scenario.
All right, Catherine Nicholson mentioning, of course, that we are, of course, in uncharted territory. Nobody's ever left the European Union before. It's been nearly 3 years now since the Brexit referendum. Has public opinion changed substantially in the UK? France 24's Hervé Amoric went to Leigh in the Greater Manchester area, a working-class town that back in June 2016 voted to leave.
Leigh is a post-industrial town, its skyline dominated by derelict cotton mills. According to a recent survey of all English constituencies, this is where young people have the fewest opportunities for social mobility. In 2016, 64% of people here voted to leave the EU, many feeling disenfranchised.
This Labour MP's priority is to attract new jobs.
The area has had a lack of investment for a number of years. So, for example, Leigh doesn't have a train station. Young people who are not supported to go to college or university, all that's left for them here are the low-skilled, low-paid jobs.
Leigh Spinners used to employ 800 people in this cotton mill. 60 jobs remain as the company now produces artificial grass. What businesses worry about here is the prospect of a no-deal Brexit.
There's no doubt that areas like this that are still dependent on manufacturing will suffer from importing materials and exporting.
This building was turned into a social enterprise for business, sport and leisure. But when it comes to Brexit, Leigh residents are divided.
Last time I voted to leave, if I had to vote again, I'd probably just stand by my vote.
I think plenty of people have changed their minds. I've changed my mind. I voted to leave, but I don't think I'd vote that way again.
What would it take for opposition MPs like this one to back the Prime Minister's Brexit deal?
It's the cost of importing and exporting that's a real concern for businesses here in Leigh. So if they don't get something like they already have within the deal of the Customs Union, our businesses are going to be in danger.
If Theresa May cannot protect jobs in areas like this one, she's unlikely to win the support of opposition MPs for her Brexit plan.
Watching that report, Duncan Fairgrieve, what's your reaction and your thoughts on what the UK wants right now?
I mean, I think that's what a lot of European leaders are asking themselves. We heard earlier on from your correspondent, from Catherine, there's a great deal of frustration, I think, in Europe because after such a long time, it seems incredible that there is no clear position. But in Parliament, I don't think we have a majority for any of the potential solutions. So that brings us back to the scenario of going to the people.
Wyn Grant was saying if you had another election, it would be a hung Parliament. You agree with that? Things haven't changed substantially?
I mean, the Conservatives are not going to be in a very good position, given they haven't got a great result to put to the people. So I think part of the discussion of a general election is to put more pressure on the MPs for the vote tonight. If they had to defend their record, it's not going to be easy. On the other side, as we know, the opposition are not in a very good position either. Jeremy Corbyn has been submerged in the current controversy about anti-Semitic behaviour of some MPs, etc. So it's a very difficult position. So as you say, I think we could well be in the terrain of a hung parliament.
Wyn Grant, in the 8 weeks since we last had a meaningful vote in the UK, one of the changes is, of course, the breakaway from both the Conservative and Labour Party of those Remainers who are now sitting as independents. Are we witnessing a fragmentation of the political landscape in the UK?
Well, there is a measure of fragmentation, obviously, although I think it's halted for now. And of course, they are organised as a group within Parliament, but they are in no position to fight a general election. They are not organised yet as a political party and won't be for some time. So I think there are limits to the fragmentation. I mean, certainly the Liberal Democrats, who take a strong Remain position, have not made any kind of breakthrough in the polls.
Catherine Nicholson, you mentioned earlier the steadfastness of the rest of the 27 in the European bloc. Is there a bit of grandstanding in that? As we get closer to the date, a no-deal Brexit would be a catastrophe, not just for the British, but for everyone.
There's certainly a recognition on the European side that there would be huge costs involved from a no-deal Brexit. France, Belgium, Spain, the Netherlands among the countries that would be the most hard hit by that. That's measurable and predictable by economists. In terms of the solidarity of the EU 27, I think we ought to remember that they've been giving this solidarity over the withdrawal arrangements, where we're probably more likely to see splits in the EU is when we're talking about the future relationship between the UK and the European Union. Emmanuel Macron talking about trying to use the backstop as leverage over French fishing rights, that kind of thing. Different countries positioning themselves there. At the moment, we are still seeing solidarity and this real just desire among European leaders to just make a decision. Nathalie Loiseau saying earlier, this is the best possible solution. It's up to Parliament.
The France's European Affairs Minister. Yeah, this is the best solution. Of course, we're not there yet. We're not talking about the trade deal yet. We're
certainly not.
We're still talking about the divorce arrangement. Did you think, Wyn Grant, 17 days away, we'd be in this position?
Well, no, I didn't think we'd be in this position. I mean, I thought by now we would have come to some sort of deal and then we could proceed to talk about the future relationship. But the problem is that there's, as has already been said, there's no majority in the House of Commons really for any way forward. And that, of course, in turn does reflect quite deep divisions within the country.
Duncan Fairgrieve, have you personally made provisions as a British subject living in France? How are you preparing?
As a British European, it's
how are you preparing for Brexit?
Dying breed at the moment. I mean, it does obviously. I mean, it obviously does pose question for those of us that travel around Europe that are British Europeans. I mean, clearly on a personal basis, that's true. At the university, we get questions all the time about Brexit. It covers so many different areas. I mean,
are you applying for residency, citizenship? What are you doing?
Well, I don't reveal my own position, but I'm a British national. I'm a British European. I prefer it to leave it at that. You're right. We're in some ways being forced to make a choice, and that is an uncomfortable position to be in. I'd have much preferred the UK to have continued as it had done for the previous 30-40 years. But that's unless things change, that is obviously unlikely to happen.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank you, Duncan Fairgrieve. I want to thank Catherine Nicholson, Wyn Grant for joining us from Warwick University, and we'll have live coverage of that vote coming up at 7 p.m. UK time.